doesn't get any better than that. I can feel it deep in my bones. Like a part of me I never noticed before. That sound is an extension of my being. And this land that's governed by death, I will paint it red with this shard of destruction. I couldn't dream of a more fulfilling job. Such a beautiful sound! Like a symphony! This stone is amazing!
Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is a story full of characters fixated on breaking through the bonds that the world has seemingly placed upon them. Whether you look at the brothers' improbable quest for restoring their bodies, Ling's desire for kingship, greed's underlying need for human connection, or even Father's endeavor to defy and overtake God, these characters are overcome with an ambition that seems to supersede what is actually possible given the hands that they've been dealt in life. And while there is no shortage of characters that are willing to remain and not reach higher than their stations, the narrative is lacking in the type of person that is able to address some important themes by cutting through idealism and blind ambition to see the world for exactly what it is. Until we properly meet Solf J. Kimblee. Note that this video will be about the Kimblee of the original manga and Brotherhood, not the one from the 2003 adaptation. While there are some parallels between the two Kimblees, they do diverge in several big ways, and I just happen to find the Brotherhood version far more appealing. The Crimson Alchemist is actually one of the first characters in the series that we're introduced to, but we aren't really allowed into his world until further down the road. And what a cold, twisted world that proves to be. Above all things, Kimblee is a bona fide psychopath. He relishes in pain, suffering, and destruction, and describes the sounds of agony and bloodshed like absolute music to his ears. He seems to have a sort of almost erotic fixation on extreme auditory stimuli in general, with the sounds of the explosions that he creates being particularly pleasurable to him. But as prominent as his psychotic traits are, they're surprisingly not the characteristics that define him. In an interesting move when it comes to his characterization, Kimblee contrasts his love for violence with a great amount of pragmatic realism. He is part sadistic agent of destruction and part eloquent amoral realist. He dismisses morality as a nuisance that only serves to distract people from their true goals, and his ability to see things from a cold and neutral standpoint makes him one of the most insightful characters in the series, using his cut-and-dry philosophy to see situations as they are without getting led astray by fanciful notions.
You're insane, Kimblee. My standards do tend to differ from society's. However, if I survive this battle, then the world will have chosen my sanity over yours.
There's a bit of playful wickedness in the idea that one of the most amoral individuals in this setting is the one that seems to see things the clearest. Seeing as everyone in the story acknowledges that Kimblee sees things far differently from society, from a certain point of view, it could be construed that his brand of amorality is one that has its benefits from a logical standpoint. That maybe this allows him to see things clearer than anybody. Not that I'd ever be one to advocate moral decay, and the series' conclusion is one that contradicts some of Kimblee's ideas, but it's hard not to concede that his philosophy has its practical advantages. Now, while his lack of morals helped to make him the textbook psychopath, Kimblee is not only self-aware of this, but able to reel it in when he needs to. He was able to pass his State Alchemist certification test by hiding his psychopathic traits, further displaying how pragmatic and logical he is. Kimblee's philosophy in life is one tinged with nihilistic aspects, but while most nihilists are defined by a concrete disinterest in all things, Kimblee is far from apathetic and detached from the joys and extremes of life. He is never one to stray from the action. He has been shown to let his rage get the better of him, and his hedonism dictates his behavior at times. Upon being at the brink of death, he is overcome by excitement because he is reminded that his choice to live on the edge is truly what makes him feel alive, since he is always operating so close to death.
Yes, death. It's closing in. One who spreads death and destruction must accept their pursuit. He will never be far from either. But what could be more beautiful than doing work that puts your soul at risk? Because that's what it means to be alive. At least on this battlefield!
This tendency of his to live life on the edge ensures that he always remains honest. While he isn't adverse to using deception if he needs to, Kimblee never acts in a way that would be traitorous to his convictions and true self. And being someone who operates on such radical truths, he can immediately sense dishonesty. Because of his ability to eliminate bias and analyze situations without the burden of a moral compass or a side to truly belong to, Kimblee is the character most capable of calling people out on their foolishness or hypocrisy. For the majority of the series, the brothers fight against the tide, constantly looking for ways to defy their fate and bypass equivalent exchange, which is made doubly difficult when the two resolve to not harm any innocents in the process. But when Alphonse tells Kimblee that he wishes to both save people and get his body back, Kimblee dismisses this as foolish idealism. He says that life follows equivalent exchange, and as such, things probably won't ever work out perfectly for them. The world doesn't allow for anyone to have their cake and eat it too, and he tells Al that if he hesitates on his original goal due to this meaningless morality, he may end up not accomplishing either of his goals. And this is quite a resounding statement that not only adds an element of cynicism to the narrative, but is a sentiment that the audience may have shared at that point in the story. He constantly mocks the paradox and Ed and Al's unwillingness to kill despite their desperate yearning to get their bodies back. He says that this is a naive and unrealistic way to go about life given their goals, but what's important is that he is not malicious when he debates ethics with them. Kimblee speaks legitimate truths based on what is known in the situation. He is a bit of a mediator, laying the facts out there and allowing the brothers to do with his words what they will, all the while being entertained by their journeys. In one of the flashbacks to the Ishvalan slaughter, this type of reasoning is shown again. Upon seeing Hawkeye and Mustang agonize at the fact that they're killing innocents, Kimblee reminds them that this is their job. They were not told that this would be glamorous or that they were going to be righteous, upstanding soldiers. They joined the military by choice, knowing that things may come to this. They were told that their job was to follow orders, and now it's time to follow through with their oath. Essentially, he tells them to man up because this is what they signed up for.
I thought alchemy was meant to be used to help people. So why is it being used to kill them instead?
Because that's the job we state alchemists have been given to do. You ask why we're here killing these people instead of protecting them? Because this is a war and that's what soldiers do. Isn't that right?
You think this is our job? To cause tragedy?
Well, that's how it seems.
That's enough, Kimblee!
I'll tell you what I don't get. Did you people expect something different? You act like you're surprised, like you didn't choose this. Did you put on that uniform thinking you wouldn't be asked to kill? The one thing worse than death is to avert your eyes from it. Look straight at the people you kill. Don't take your eyes off them for a second. And don't ever forget them, because I promise that they won't forget you.
Kimblee finds quite a bit of entertainment in pointing out the stupidity of morals. While he never really says much about his views on power, from what we see in the story, I'd imagine that his thoughts on it are similar to that of King Bradley. But contrasting Bradley, he concerns himself much more with people, because they fascinate him. And when it comes to the military, he wants to point out the blatant hypocrisy in those who ironically champion righteous morality, as if they're the better people for feeling some remorse. Kimblee is fine with bloodshed on a grand scale, but he has absolutely zero tolerance for naivete and others seeing themselves as righteous when they contradict this with their actions. He does enjoy fighting quite a bit, but Kimblee usually only battles someone when he has a point to prove or a job to carry out. His true fights tend to be ideological ones, where he wants to prove the flaws in his opponent's thinking. And the views he champions tend to be ones that are quite damning on humanity. As we see in the very same scene, Kimblee says something that alludes to another important trait of his personality: his belief that humans are inherently violent in nature.
Tell me, miss, you're not very happy to be here, are you? Well, you don't appear to be. But can you honestly tell me, in that split second when you take down an enemy, you don't allow yourself to feel the slightest tinge of satisfaction and pride in your skills? Well, Miss Marksman.
And what's interesting here is that while horrified, Hawkeye doesn't actually deny this or tell Kimblee that he's wrong. This is one of the few times that he actually hints at the idea that mankind is full of posturing hypocrites, acting as if they're on some moral high ground when deep down, everyone is the same, and just hide it to varying degrees. Although he doesn't verbalize this that much, it is an idea that defines him. He knows of the inner darkness in people because he is possessed by that darkness. Kimblee really has no true allegiance in the grand fight of the story, and when he isn't killing the masses because he needs his fix, he legitimately doesn't display any malice to anyone unless they show a lack of consistency or conviction. He does not value himself as someone who is above taking orders, because he sees and acknowledges the truth of hierarchy and his place in it. However, he does not let this hierarchy define him. Kimblee is distinct in that while everyone has grand goals to take down homunculi, humans, alchemy, or even God, his ultimate goal is to be an observer of the war to come, all the while engaging in his explosive and violent urges along the way. Though he is on the homunculi's side, he is only there because of the powers they bestow upon him. He has no stake in this fight. He just wants to see what happens when humans and homunculi clash. He's interested in seeing what the world's fate will be, and believes that the battle's outcome will be a cosmic endorsement of that side's philosophy.
Do you have any idea what they're doing? What you're helping them to achieve?
I'm curious to see how the world will change.
What?
Both sides clashing. Will against will. Life versus life. Humans or the homunculi. Which one will triumph? Which side does the world prefer? The homunculi like to see themselves as the next step in the evolution of humanity, but that's for history to decide.
In his final contribution to the story, Kimblee remains as consistent as ever. He's able to remain individualistic within the huge amount of souls in Pride's body, thinking of their nightmarish screams as a lullaby. He points out the shameful irony of a homunculus named Pride wanting to jump ship into a human, a lower life form, in order to escape mortal peril. Pride has no pride as a homunculus, and lives its life in direct opposition to what it stands for, and as such, Kimblee deems it unworthy of existence. Logical until the end, doing what he sees as the natural order in the world, Kimblee bows out from the story with satisfaction and the tip of a hat. Kimblee is very similar to Hunter x Hunter's Hisoka. He has hedonistic tendencies, he's a bit of an agent of chaos, he doesn't take sides, and he simply takes part in the things that interest him. The most notable similarity between the two for me, however, is that like Hisoka, Kimblee is a great narrative tool for balancing the story. Though while Hisoka is a counterweight when it comes to tone, Kimblee balances things more thematically and ideologically. The writer of the series, Himuro Arakawa, goes through great lengths to ensure that the flaws of her characters are laid bare to the world. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is not a story about idealized people, flawless in every way and righteous in their path to victory. It's a story about simple, flawed humans, struggling within themselves as they walk the path that they hope with all their might is the right one. No character in this story is without their hypocrisies or personal faults, and Kimblee is the narrative tool used to great effect to ensure this. Without his constant questioning of our protagonists' and antagonists' viewpoints, we would have a story lacking in believability when it came to the nature of its characters. His interactions with the main characters really accentuate exactly what Ed and Al were standing for, and why they were actually a bit foolish to do so. And yet one could argue that this foolishness is admirable as all hell for what it represents. We never might have viewed Mustang, Hawkeye, and Armstrong as truly flawed people if he didn't call them out. We would never have known about Pride's tragic flaw if Kimblee hadn't actively demonstrated it himself. And one of the most impressive things about this is not just that Kimblee does all of it, but that he does it without feeling forced, and while being totally in character, with his need to cut through morality and his ability to challenge character philosophy using the known rules of the world being a byproduct of his characterization. Kimblee is quite an exceptional character. For someone who has a relatively minor role in terms of plot impact, he leaves his mark on the narrative as a whole through his contribution to its themes and philosophy. Through his interactions, he brings to light some things that the audience may not have thought about regarding the world and setting, and emphasized and strengthened the ideals of the characters and message of the narrative through his direct questioning of pre-established ideas. Kimblee also just adds a bit of chaos factor to the series, while remaining completely consistent to his ideals and personality. And though his stay was short-lived, The Crimson Alchemist is a great example of how to use secondary characters to add balance, reveal insight, present character flaws, and emphasize the ideals shown by characters through confrontation. He can be quite an undervalued character, and I feel like the narrative would have a very distinct something missing if he was absent. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video. Kimblee is a character that a few of you have wanted to know my thoughts on, so I hope that I didn't disappoint. And many, many thanks to the patrons who stuck with me this past month despite a lack of content. One last thing, I'd just like to thank Displate for sponsoring this video. Displate is a company that specializes in producing beautiful metal posters ranging from simple nature pieces to ones of anime and video game characters. On screen right now are some pictures of a few that they were generous enough to send me, so you can get an idea of the type of stuff that they do. There's also a link to their anime and video game section in the description, so check them out. If you find some stuff that you'd be interested in, be sure to use the discount code ALEXANDER with an X in all capitals to get 20% off your purchase. This promotion only lasts until November 15th, so go for it while you can. Anyways, with all that said, thanks very much again for checking out the video. I wish everyone the best, and I'll see you in the next one.